right, guys. Here we are, Saving Shiloh, and we're gonna start with chapter 11. I think that's about where we might have done this in class, but we'll see. Um, don't forget, Judd Travers had a wreck. Um, they found his boot, and then Marty gave it back, and David's upset about it. So here we go, chapter 11. It's the next day on the school bus. I tell David about the light. And even though it probably don't mean spit, David Howard can work up one heck of a story with it. I know. Like a signal or something, he asks eagerly. Well, it could have been, I say. He's cautious, though. How do you know it wasn't just somebody with a flashlight out jogging after dark? It was moving too slow for that. It didn't stay on more than 15 seconds. Like somebody looking for something, asks David. Maybe. The other boot, whispers David. We found one, and now Judd wants to find the other. David, that don't make any sense at all, I tell him. Well, why would the killer leave a body out in plain sight, but then hide the shoes somewhere else? The murder weapon, then, says David. Maybe Judd buried it somewhere along Middle Island Creek, and now that the police are looking for it, he wants to be sure it stays buried. I lean back against the seat and I stare out the window, wondering if David could be right. The sheriff hasn't found enough evidence to arrest Judd, but everybody from here to Wheeling is ready to string him up. It seems maybe they got good reason. Besides, says David, looking over at me, if somebody's looking for something, why would they go out at night? That's what I'm telling you. We got a mystery on our hands, but it don't mean it has anything to do with Judd, I say. Deep inside, though, I'm thinking maybe it does. What's fun is sitting in Miss Talbot's class, me and David having the secret during math. We pass these notes back and forth. How high off the ground was the light, writes David. And how in the world would I know that? And I wonder if it was dark. I couldn't even tell if there was ground. But I write back 3 feet, maybe 4. Then it was a man holding the flashlight, answers David. If it had been a kid, it'd be more like 2 or 3 feet off the ground. I tell you, he can find clues in almost anything. Marty, says Miss Talbot. 3, I say, staring at the blackboard where she's pointing. I don't even know what the question is. Somebody snickers. What I'm asking, says the teacher, is whether you would multiply or if you would divide. Well, what I'm asking, says the teacher, is whether you multiply or divide. Well, multiply, I tell her, making a guess. Correct, she says, and I let out breath real slow. You can tell I haven't read in a while out loud. On the bus going home, David says he'll ask his ma if he can stay at the house this weekend. That way we can take turns watching for the light. So when I get home with Dara Lynn and Shiloh comes dancing and wiggling down the drive to meet us, I'm not surprised to hear the phone ringing as soon as I step inside. Ma says it's your turn to come to our house, David tells me. I can't sleep over there until you come here. I asked Ma, can I spend the night at David's? And I think it's his turn to come here, she says. Well, he was just here, I say. Not to spend the night, she says. Nothing is ever simple with mothers. Well, I can't go down there until you sleep here, I tell David. Finally, Ma says I can go to David's house for an overnight if David will sleep over the weekend after that. And on Friday morning, I put my toothbrush and my pajamas and some clean underpants in my book bag before I leave for school. You be polite at the Howards now, Ma says as she hands me a plate of fried cornmeal mush, cut in slices crisp around the edges, and I slather on the margarine and then the hot syrup. Why don't anybody ever invite me to sleep over, gripes Dara Lynn, glaring down at her fried mush. 'Cause you're a sourpuss, that's why, I tell her. On the way to the bus stop, Dara Lynn says to me, I wish that you'd get run over and that your eyes pecked out by crows. Well, I wish you'd fall down a hole and pull the dirt in after you, I say. If Shiloh hears the meanness in our voices, he sure don't show it. Happy as can be, trotting along beside us till he sees the school bus coming to take us away. See you tomorrow, boys, I tell him, and I give him a hug. Somebody on the school bus is passing out gummy bears, though, and Dara Lynn revives in a hurry, sitting there beside a girl in 3rd grade, eating gummy bears and swinging her legs. Dara Lynn don't look like such a poor, neglected child to me. Fred Niles gets on, and he's got a story to tell. Seems that somebody walked right into their house the day before and stole 2 jackets and a shotgun. Just walked right in while you were home? Asked Sarah. Well, Ma was only gone 2 minutes, says Fred, and she walked down the road to check the mailbox, and later we discovered what all was missing. We're locking our doors and windows from now on. Never had to do it before. Wouldn't surprise me if Judge Travers had something to do with it, says Michael Schultz. Heard he got his cast off this week. I bet he's making up for lost time. I got this feeling that Michael may be right, but I say, could have been anyone at all. You know anybody else around here who would walk in a neighbor's house and steal from him? Michael asks. At school, we are so deep in Alaska, I don't see we can ever get out. We're buying and feeding imaginary sled dogs for math, figuring how many pounds of food per day they're going to eat and how many pounds they can pull. We're studying Eskimo paintings and art and listening to Eskimo folk tales for spelling. I got to memorize words like tundra and Aleutian and glacier and petroleum and permafrost. Now I know I never want to feel what 76 degrees below zero is like. I get off at David's house after school, and David has his own key. His ma gets home a half hour after he does, and she's got a pile of papers to grade. Hi, Marty, she says. There's chocolate pudding in the refrigerator if you boys want a snack. We already found it, David tells her. I guess maybe everybody feels more comfortable at his own table in his own house. I know I feel a little awkward at David's first off. There's always a tablecloth. I can't imagine a cloth on our table at home. Becky would drop spinach on it first off, and Dara Lynn would spill her milk. The Howards have napkins too, cloth napkins, and everything's in bowls that you pass around. Ma just sets a pan right from the stove on our tablet. It keeps the food hot if you want some more. David's folks are nice, though. David and I tell his dad how we're studying Alaska, and he tells us about this dog sled race that they hold up there every year called the Iditarod, and how you have to travel 1,000 miles and sleep out in the snow and be careful your dogs don't drop off the ice, and I don't know what all. You see much of Judge Travers these days? Mr. Howard asked me finally when David's ma brings out the dessert. Some, I tell him. I wonder how he takes to all this talk about the murder. I don't take it all at all, same as you or me, I tell him. Mr. Howard grows quiet after that. Later, we're lying on our backs on the top bunk in David's room trying to make out the constellations on his ceilings. David and his dad got a package of those stick-on stars and planets, and they put them in just the right place so that the ceiling looks something like the sky would look if you stepped outside at night at a certain time of the year. That's Orion, the hunter, says David, pointing. You see those two bright stars there in the middle and then the three bright stars below? Well, the two stars are supposed to be his shoulders and the three stars are his belt. Now, who figured that out, do you suppose? How did they get a whole man out of 5 little stars? Why wouldn't those 2 stars on top be the eyes of a wolf or something and the 3 below be his mouth? Makes as much sense to me as a hunter. And then because we're talking about hunters, maybe David says, I'll bet it was Judge Travers who stole those jackets and that shotgun from Fred's house. I roll over on my side trying to see his face in the dark. How come whatever happens has to be Judd's fault? I ask. How come it all goes back to him? David thinks about that a minute, and I guess it's because anything that happened around here before was usually Judd's fault. The way he'd cheat Mr. Wallace over at the store. We both seen him do that. Give him a $10 bill and then get to talking, and then when he got his change back, say he gave Wallace a 20. Driving drunk and knocking over people's mailboxes. Kicking his dogs. Other people have done one of those things maybe once in their lives, but Judd can do all those things in a single month. Yeah, but what if he's changed, I say. David thinks about that too. Maybe, he says. But once you get a reputation, it follows you around like your shadow. That's what Mom says anyway. He's quiet a moment, and then he tells me, Mom said I can't come to your house anymore unless we promise not to go anywhere near Judd's. Right then I see how I get connected to people's minds with Judge Travers. You haven't gone with me to his house since last fall, I tell David. We can keep on not going there together. I don't care. I just wanted you to know, says David. Next thing, they'll suspect me of murder. You know, Marty, if he did have anything to do with that killing that man, he could go to jail for a long time, and you probably wouldn't have to worry about him ever again, David says. I think about that a while. Why don't I wish Judd would be found guilty? Why don't I wish that he'd get sent to jail? David's right. It sure would solve a lot of problems just like that. I wonder why I've been trying so hard to take his side. I think it's because I think I know how Judd got to be the way he is. That's why. Once you know what happened to someone as a little kid, it's hard to think of him as 100% evil. If Judd's the way he is because of what his dad done to him, though maybe his dad was that way on account of what his dad done to him. And maybe the grandpa was that way because of his father. When is it going to end? Dad picks me up early the next day before he starts his mail route and takes me down to the vets in St. Mary's. I'm stacking 20-pound bags of cat box litter when John Collins comes in to scrub his hands, getting ready to operate on a collie that was hit by a car. The vet scrubs with a brush, even under his fingernails. What's happening up in Shiloh these days, Marty, he asked me. Oh, I've had 2 customers come in this week telling me they had their homes have been broken into. Walk-ins, more like it. Somebody coming in when they weren't home and helping themselves to whatever they want. You must be talking about Fred Niles' family, I say. They got a shotgun and some jackets missing. No, I hadn't heard about them. But one family's missing 2 $20 bills that they kept on a shelf in their kitchen. And a woman tells me she came home and half of her food in the refrigerator were gone. Drove her husband to work and she came back and there was a whole roast chicken, half a cake, and a pan of scalloped potatoes missing. Now who do they figure took it, I ask. Nobody knows. There's talk about Judge Travers doing it, of course. As I said to Mrs. Bates, it could be more than one person. Could be a whole ring of housebreakers. I sure don't like to hear about the shotgun, though. Walking in a house when no one's there and helping yourself to a chicken is one thing, but walking in with a gun, if they start using that shotgun, that's something else. Doc Collins puts on his surgical gown and then his gloves, and he goes into the operating room. I go on with my stacking, and maybe it's me who's got his head in the sand, I'm thinking. Maybe I just don't want to face the facts. It could be Judd. Well, how long's he had that cast off now? 3 days? When did the robberies begin? 3 days ago, exactly. All right, we'll see you next time.